chapter 3, so let's get on it. Valeria and the Enemy of Time, chapter 3. I threw it. I threw it away from me like it was a dead mouse. I shook my hand and flicked my fingers, slapping them on my jeans. I shuddered. But then I was curious. I got up from the dirt and looked down at the mitten. It looked the same as it had when I first pulled it out of my pocket 10 minutes ago, except for the bit that was unraveled and tied to the branch. There was a ketchup stain on the thumb and a little fraying on the underside of the cuff. I pulled the tied end off the tree, wrapped the end of the yarn around the mitten, and stuck it back in my pocket. "Okay, get a hold of yourself, Valeria," I said. "Something crazy is going on, but you've got to stay calm. Got to figure it out." "What is it? A wormhole?" I'd read more than a few fantasy and science fiction books. "Is it a dream?" I slapped myself. It hurt. I screamed. My sore throat didn't close up and refused to let any sound out. I ran around as fast as I could in a circle next to the trees. It didn't feel like my feet were dragging in molasses. Definitely not a dream. I didn't know if that made me feel better or not. Maybe I'm going crazy. I'd read books about girls whose brains just went haywire when they were about my age. I couldn't rule that one out for sure, especially after the bus wreck memory, but I decided that I felt sane, so that would be good enough for me. Is someone playing a trick on me? I thought, suddenly unwilling to speak out loud. There was no way they could have done the mitten trick. That was the one thing that convinced me. It was something completely strange and unreal. Whoever or whatever was doing this was keeping me away from the house, but I could try to figure something out. A nagging thought was bugging me, and I looked around. I knew I'd been out there for at least an hour. It had been about dusk when I left, but it was no closer to being dark than it had been when I started. Time had gotten stuck. Why? What was the purpose of that? But it did mean that no one back at the house would be worried about me and come looking for me. Was someone going to hurt me? So far I was fine, except for being scared. But I'm not anymore, I lied to myself. This is my mitten, and it likes me. It would never hurt me. This is my orange tree, and it is my friend. This is my fog, I yelled, which made me feel a little bit better. There was no use hanging around here in the dirt. I'd get hungry and cold, and the fog and dusk would just linger around until who knew when. If I couldn't go home, where else could I go? If I turned to the left, I would get to the road. If I turned right, I would be following the tree lane that bordered 40 acres of orange trees. I turned left. That should get me back to the road in a few minutes. Then I could follow it back to the front drive of my house. I walked for about 10 minutes, keeping the trees to my right and peering through the dense fog, looking for the blacktop, when I saw a white splotch. My heart jumped and I slowed down, hesitant about what I might find. It was my plastic bag of oranges I dropped when I picked up my mitten. I swallowed my disappointment. "Okay, well, that didn't work," I said. Only 2 options were left. I looked down the misty gray depths of the endless grove. Nope. I turned right and began walking down the tree lane. I left my sack of oranges where they lay, so I can keep track of my starting place, in case things get even more weird, I thought. I walked along the row of trees, worried that I would come upon my bag of oranges again. If that happened, I knew I'd have to try the other option, straight into the dense forest of orange trees. If I died out there, would they find me? Or would everyone be stuck in time forever? Maybe I was the only one stuck in time. I was so busy concentrating on how the whole thing would work, that I wasn't paying attention to my path. "Whoa! What's this?" I said. Something had changed. Trees rose on both sides of me. I knew this lane. It was too soon to see trees on both sides. Where was the big pothole of water that should have been there, right before the next section of trees? I looked to one side and then the other. The trees were dark, and they loomed over me, closing me in. Everything was utterly still, except the sound of my breath. I held it. I didn't want anyone to hear me breathing. I moved to the very center of the lane. I didn't want to touch these trees. These weren't my trees. They were too dark, too tall, too close together. And then I had to breathe again. I rubbed my face, pulled back my damp hair. "Forward march," I whispered to myself. I knew the trees created a hollow by their trunks, that the outer greenery touching the ground formed a curtain around a little clearing under each tree. Theo and I often played inside some of the trees. When we found a perfect one, we would cut off some of the little scratchy branches inside to make a better space. We had set up one secret hideaway with a rug, a couple of plastic crates, our Lord of the Rings action figures, and beef jerky in a canning jar so raccoons wouldn't get it. Sean was the one who had found our hideout, but he made Mom talk to us about it. She said it was fine if we wanted to have a little clubhouse, but it had to be in one of the trees near the house, and we had to let her know if we were going to be out there. She hadn't gotten the point. To be off on your own and nobody knew where you are, so they couldn't pull back the leafy twigs and say, "Hi, just checking on you two." Right then, I wished I had not thought about the hollow under the trees. Anything could be hiding there, watching me. A human or an animal or a monster. I swallowed and tried to think of something else. I was disoriented. As far as I could see ahead, which wasn't very much, the lane went straight. At least that's what it should have been doing. But I had the uncanny feeling as if I were walking in a curve. I decided to test it. I shut my eyes and kept walking as straight as I could, with my arms sticking out in front of me like a sleepwalker. My eyes jolted open when I shoved my arms up to the elbows in a tree. I yelped and ran, screaming, "Mom! Mom, help!" When I got tired of screaming, I just ran. I had another horrid thought and stopped, kneeling down to look for any of my footprints. There were none, so at least I was going somewhere and not in a circle. The curve seemed to be tightening, which meant I was going in a spiral. And in what must have been the center of the spiral, a light was glowing. It was like our sodium vapor light shining through the fog, except this one shone blue-white through the mist. I stopped. What was I going to find there? What if it were horrible or scary or dangerous? Suddenly I remembered a movie Mom had rented for us. It was called Temple Grandin. I didn't think I would like it very much, but it turned out to be interesting. Temple was a girl with autism, and she had become famous when she grew up by designing systems for animals to make them feel more comfortable. One of her famous designs was the entrance to a cattle slaughterhouse. Instead of rushing them right into the butcher with cattle stampeding and falling down and being frightened, they entered a spiral path with sides they couldn't see through. As the cattle moseyed along, they had no idea what lay in store for them ahead. They couldn't turn around and go back any more than I could. I knew that if I tried to turn around and go back, I would just end up back here. Whatever was at the center of the spiral would be patiently waiting for me. And why couldn't they be patient? They had all the time in the world. At least I had my pocket knife. The light got closer. I slowed down. When I could tell that it was around the next orange tree. I knelt down and tucked into the hollow center of the tree and peeked through the leaves. The fog wasn't dense here. It cleared out as I'd entered the inner spiral, though I could still see it all around in the distance, reflecting the blue glow. The light was beautiful. At first I couldn't tell if it came from an object or if it just was. I made out the glowing sphere and stared at it. Flickers of blue light and red-violet sparkles rose to the surface of the bright fuzzy roundness, and then they fell back into its depths again. It was hard to tell exactly how big it was. I thought it was maybe about the size of Sean's Volkswagen Bug. All I wanted to do right then was to touch it. Then a man's voice rang out in front of me. It sounded amused. "I think she likes our little star, Amina." And that's the end of chapter 3. Subscribe, come back for chapter 4.